Hey everyone, Zach here. So today I'm going to walk through setting up ServiceNow to launch Ansible job templates by name instead of by ID. If you haven't checked out my video on setting up ServiceNow with Ansible Automation Platform, go ahead and do that first because that'll get you to the point where I start in this video. And the reason why I'm going through this is because when you're working with Ansible and high availability clusters, or anytime you need to be able to do import and export and kind of treat your AAP as a resource that you can destroy and create, you don't want to be dependent on the job template or workflow template IDs. And because of that, when we build out our integrations for things like Snow, if we hard code IDs, anytime we go through those processes, we'll have to go and then update those IDs because they're not guaranteed to be consistent between your instances. So what you'll need to do to build this out is I'm in my ServiceNow instance in the REST message editor. So this is my connection to the Ansible Automation Platform Controller API, which we would have set up in our previous video here. So what I'm going to do is you would already have a endpoint for something like launch Ansible template. It might be named slightly different. I'm going to go ahead and click on that because we're going to make some slight changes. So you'll see here that in this URL, I've variabilized the template type. So one addition I did as part of this video is I made it to where you could launch job templates or workflow templates. So that template type is going to evaluate to job or workflow. And then the next piece here, we've templatized the template ID, which in the previous version, I believe I had called that variable job ID. So we're now just kind of abstracting that away a little bit, and then your launch, right? So these will be resolved in the template ID will be resolved in our new run script, which I'll get to in a moment. And then the template type can be hard coded on the configuration item based off of what your downstream template is, if it's a job template or a workflow template. So if we add those variables and we scroll down, in my case, I have some other variables in my request body. You may or may not have these, but then you'll specifically see the two new variables. And if you want to run a test, go ahead and fill these out as test value for your template ID and job, and then you can click test and it will kick off that particular job template if it exists. So now I'm going to go back. There's an additional HTTP method that we want to create, which we're going to leverage. Oh, I actually went too far back. So now there's an additional HTTP method that we're going to leverage. So we've got this get template ID that I've created. I'm going to click on this. This will be net new if you haven't, even if you went through the previous video. So in get template ID, we're going to again use that template type variable underscore templates. And if you notice here in authentication, we'll just leverage that same inherit from parent. The HTTP request is where some info is going to go. So we're going to add a query parameter for name and template name. So by doing this, we're actually allowing ourselves to do a get on the templates, but then also filter that list on the particular name. And by doing that, we should only get back the particular job template that we want to run. And again, you can go ahead and click auto generate variables, and then you can give it some test values, and you can test that out to make sure that, if you give it a template name that exists, that you get the request back with the info about that particular template, right? So job or workflow. So now how do we connect this to our actual configuration item? So this is the same configuration item I used in the previous video. Yours may look a little bit different, but in the end, we're going to connect them via variables. So what I do, or what I did for this particular example, and I think it works pretty well, is this is kind of where the one-to-one mapping begins to exist, right? So a configuration item, I'm pointing it to a single job template downstream. So I'm going to give it, what is the job template name and what is the type of the job template? These variables are both going to be hidden. So I'm going to just click on one of them here. So you'll see here that I've got them as read-only and hidden, and then I give it the variable name. I come over here and I actually give it a default value. So that's because for me, a configuration item, I do see a one-to-one mapping there. So there shouldn't be any variability here. I'm just setting them at this level so that I can have a more generic run script activity that I could use for multiple different configuration items, right? And the configuration item determines what downstream Ansible template is called. So I do this read-only and hidden for both of these. and then specify the default value that is the actual value that I want to use for this configuration item. Oh, I'm going to keep going back here. Let me go back to my favorites here, editing that catalog item. And then again, no real need to change here because that process engine, we're going to pass it to this particular workflow, and we will make an edit here, but the workflow itself will be the same. It's now just going to be leveraging those two new variables that we've set. So let's go ahead and open up our workflow editor. And then I'm going to find my launch Ansible template here. And if you have it published, you can go ahead and click check out if you need to make edits. I've already updated this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and show you all what this looks like. So this is where the meat of the changes were made. So in a previous iteration, you would have only had that initial or single REST message call that you're making to launch the template. Now you can see that we have an initial one to actually go ahead and get the template ID. And it's going to use the template type and template name, get details about that particular template, right? So it's going to execute that request, get the body, and then it's going to make sure that there's a count returned, right? So if there's no count, that means that we didn't find a template with that name. If there is a count, if we scroll down here, this request stays mostly the same. We're going to pass through the template type, so that'd be job or workflow. And then we're going to leverage the response body and get that first record's ID and leverage that and pass it through. So by genericizing this, we can actually launch a job template by name, and if anything changes on the back end, so if our controller instance needs to be destroyed and recreated and the ID of the job template changes, we don't have any issues here because we're using the name. So if the ID changes, we'll just get the latest ID when we run this job template, or sorry, when we run this script as part of a workflow. So let me go ahead and try it here. I'm just going to say localhost for testing. Launch by name. I'll click order. So when I click order, right, it should kick off that workflow. And if I come over here, and that actually happened really quickly because I just have like a no-op job pointed at this, but if I click on it, you'll see that it worked. So yeah, that's my demo for this one. Highly recommend using this to just kind of decouple yourself from the IDs, as it's not as resilient when you start to make changes to your environment. Thanks for watching.